So good evening. Well, school's out. Yay! Got all the stuff done I needed to do today, and I don't have to go back till August. So it's a good deal. All right. Yes. I found my notebook at home. It was buried on a shelf. Yeah, so found it. I don't know why anybody would put a notebook on a shelf. It should have been left out on the recliner where I always use it. But no, it was good. It was just behind some stuff, and it took some searching. So that was good. Few announcements as we begin. One Circles will meet Sunday evening. So check with your group leaders about such details. We'll have men's breakfast coming up on June 1st. Coffee in the Country for the ladies will be on June 15th. And there's singing at Jeff and Julie Porter's house June 21st. So lots of good things coming up. And wow, in the bulletin tonight, this one caught my attention. 70th anniversary for Lawrence and Maryland Sand coming up. And so June 8th is their anniversary, and we'd like to have a card shower for them and share memories and photos if you have any of Lawrence and Maryland. So what a milestone for them to be able to celebrate 70 years together. That's wonderful. At this time, are there any other announcements? This time we'll sing number 483, 483. Is it for me, dear Savior, thy glory and thy rest? For me so weak and sinful, oh, shall I be so blessed? Oh, Savior, my Redeemer, what can I but adore? And magnify and praise thee and love thee evermore. Is it for me thy welcome, thy gracious enter in? For me thy come, ye blessed, for me so full of sin. O Savior, my Redeemer, what can I but adore? And magnify and praise thee and love thee evermore. O Savior, precious Savior, my heart is at thy feet. I bless thee and I love thee, and thee I long to meet. O Savior, my Redeemer, what can I but adore? And magnify and praise thee and love thee evermore. I'll be with thee forever and never grieve thee more. Dear Savior, I must praise thee and love thee evermore. O Savior, my Redeemer, what can I but adore? And magnify and praise thee and love thee evermore.
Will you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for the beautiful weather that we're able to enjoy outside, to see your creation and everything that you have made for us all around us. Father, we pray that you be with us tonight. We thank you for this ability to come here together to study a portion of your word, and we just pray that we're able to take the things that we're studying tonight and to learn more about them, to find ways to apply them to our lives, and to take them and let them be able to show your love to those all around the world. Father, we pray that you be with those that are on our prayer list, those that have lost loved ones, those that may be in the hospital, and those that have had recent surgeries. We just pray that you be with each of them and their families respectively, and just pray that we can see them again real soon. Father, we pray most of all thanking you for your Son, for his willingness to come down to earth, to leave his perfect home in heaven, to come down to earth, to bring us your will, to show what we should do each and every day, and to die on that cross for each and every one of us. Father, we know that his sacrifice was perfect because he is perfect, and we are so thankful for that. Please forgive us of our sins. In Jesus' name, amen.
Check test. Okay, that's on. Since Justin has forsaken us, well, that's a bad word. Since he has left to go on harvest, decided to move the operation back down here, but I've kind of forgotten how to do all this. So let's see. And we got a nice stool here to sit on too. This is great. Well, that's nice. And it twists. So, can y'all understand why I teach middle school, right? Because I'm basically 12. So, 12 years old in a giant body. Okay. Here we go. So we are in Daniel chapter 6 tonight. It is handy having a great big table up there. Maybe I need to get both podiums out. I used to do that. It seems like maybe have two podiums. No, I'm good for tonight. I think we'll make it work. We'll see. Oh, that two-part one over there. That's right. That's right. Okay. We'll get this streamlined here as the summer progresses. This is going to work for now. Okay, so we are in Daniel. We have last week we concluded Daniel 5, got started on Daniel chapter 6, got a little ways into the chapter, but not too far. And I did see just before services started tonight too, I got a message from the guy that's rebinding my Bible. And so I'm hoping to see that he's ready to wrap it up and get it back to me, so I can have the Bible I'm used to. So Daniel chapter 6, we started, and in Daniel chapter 5, we saw the end of the Babylonian Empire. I mean, that the Babylonian Empire ends in chapter 6. And it's remarkable if you read the history of that. We know that date. That was October 12th, 539 BC. I don't know how they know that so specifically. I don't know how they're able to just date it with such certainty. But just resource after resource that I looked at, they all use that same date. So it's interesting to me. Now, some things that we kind of talked about last week was Darius, who is the king at the beginning of chapter 6. He's the king at the end of chapter 5 verse 31. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about the age of 62. And then chapter 6 verse 1, it says, now it seemed good to Darius to appoint 120 satraps. Turns out those may not be the same guy. Darius was a common translated name into Aramaic for some of the kings. There were several Dariuses, and Darii.
And it could be that the Darius, there are some resources that are very adamant that it is absolutely not the same person. J.J. Turner in his commentary wrote that it was another writer by John Whitcomb in his book titled Darius the Mede has shown quite conclusively that there are two different Dariuses, because the Darius that came into Babylon the night that Belshazzar died, on that specific date, they know the exact date that happened, and they believe they know that he died about 6 weeks later on November the 6th of that same year. And so it's just not enough time for the events of all those events to transpire. And so that was the next Darius that succeeded him that would have been the one that is in chapter 6. All of that to say, does it really matter which Darius it was? I'm not sure that it matters for our understanding of the story and our understanding of the meaning of the things that are going on, but it's just one of those kind of historical things that's a point of interest, at least to me. And so since I'm up here, I get to talk about it. As you're reading through the text, I don't think it would ever occur to me to think, I wonder if 531 and 6:1 are the same Darius. I would have never suspected they weren't, but turns out they're probably not. Could be a Herod situation. They actually give the, I could have put these on the slides, I guess, but the Darius of 531, his actual name was Ugbaru, Ugbaru, and was a governor under Cyrus the Persian, and he was killed in battle on the 11th or November 6th, sorry, just a few weeks after the events of chapter 5. And then the Darius of Daniel 6:1. So the first guy was Ugbaru. This guy is Gubaru. Switch the G and the U around, and I suppose that means something in their language, but it looks the same to me, almost. But he is the one after the fall of Babylon under Ugbaru. Gubaru becomes the governor of Babylon, and he is the Daniel of 6:1. So, Guber. Gomer, had Gomer and Goober, I don't know. And this was most likely in the following year, 538 BC, rather than in the year of the fall of Babylon, which was 539 BC. So, and by the way, not the same Darius that we're going to see in chapter 9, verse 1, is what these guys are saying. So they've got a lot more letters after their name than I do. And so in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, is the guy in chapter 9, and that's a different Darius than the one that we have in 5 or 6. So multiple Dariuses, like we got multiple Herods and multiple Jameses and stuff in the Bible. So sorting through some of that, only bringing it up so that we don't get unnecessarily confused by thinking all this stuff happens under one guy when it's kind of spread out a little more than that. Okay, that's more than enough time on Darius in that context anyway, and which Darius it is. So last week we talked about the setup, that this Darius appoints 120 rulers, satraps, governors, whatever the proper level of translation is for that type of ruler over the kingdom, so that they would be in charge of all the areas. And Daniel is elevated to one of the top 3, and then evidently even to the kind of the chief one of those 3. So Daniel has kind of dominion over all of those rulers to see to it that they carry out the business of the kingdom appropriately. And we're not surprised to find Daniel in that position, because we've seen Daniel elevated every time we see Daniel, he's being elevated to a higher position because of the faithfulness in the way that he acts and in the success that he has. And that kind of reminds us of some other Bible characters. You think of Joseph, right, as he was sent to Egypt, and he started out as a slave, but eventually became the head of Potiphar's house, and then was sent to prison, and eventually he's running the whole prison, and then gets out of prison, and eventually he's running the whole kingdom, right? So we see that when faithful men act faithfully, that God rewards them, and he rewards that service. So we see that happening with Daniel as well. So that kind of sets us up. I think we're ready for the next section, actually. I think we got that first section kind of talked about last week, and then we'll start in verse 6 for today. So then, these verses 6 through 9, these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows. King Darius live forever. All the commissioners of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the high officials, and the governors have consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it may not be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which may not be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document, that is, the injunction. So, first of all, they're claimed that all of the commissioners have come together. How many are we talking? 120 plus. Who would that include? Well, I mean, they're missing at least one from their count, right? And so, did they actually have all of the governors sign on to this? Well, I mean, the obvious answer is no, because Daniel didn't sign on to it. But then that begs the question, well, how many of them did they actually get signed on to it? Did they just get a representative? Did they get a cohort of governors that they could manipulate, that maybe had their same, a faction or whatever, that they could control, and they got the support or the backing of those governors and saw that as enough to get the job done? So, Johnny? Right. And so it seems likely, at least, that at the end, when punishment is meted out, that it is not, they don't wipe out all of the guys. That I don't think the lions weren't that hungry. So probably just a representative of that group of rulers is what we're talking about. But that kind of leads us into the next thing. This really is false piety. They're presenting this as being, a very wise decision, as being something that's very commendable for them to do. They presented as something that needs to be celebrated and looked at in a very good light. But really, their motives are impure. They're being manipulative in the way that they present it, because they're presuming to speak for people that they don't have the right to speak for, and they are misrepresenting people that they know would speak differently about it. And so there's lots of little intrigue going on here that just on the surface it looks like, we kind of wonder about this king. Is he super smart? Is he easily manipulated? Is he surrounded by a bunch of yes men that he's just used to getting his way all the time, and everything? So it kind of makes us wonder about Darius right off the bat, because this, of course, we know the end of the story, and we can kind of read between the lines maybe in ways that he can't. But it seems like if something's too good to be true, maybe it really is too good to be true. Maybe it's not true. And if you've got guys that are coming to you to bring in this tremendous idea, and they're telling you all of the pros of the idea and all of the wonderful aspects of the idea, and they're not bringing up any possible objections or problems with it, that maybe we need to look a little deeper. Chuck? Yeah.
They lay in the stuff that they want in between there,
Yeah.
it's not noticed. That's
Yeah.
same old thing.
Yeah. If they're this excited about doing something that on the surface looks like it's being done to honor the king, and looks like it's being done maybe, and maybe you can sell it in a way, he's a new king in a new kingdom with new subjects. And maybe this is a way to get the kingdom to to unite in a way around a new king, or to get them to lay aside, thoughts about the old king or thoughts about the false, their gods or whatever it might be. And it's a way to, maybe we're selling it as a way to unify, but there's something else at work here. There are other motives at work, and the king misses it. The king misses those, whether it's because he doesn't ask questions, or he's just enamored with the idea that he's going to be receiving the praise, and that feels good to him, so he's excited about that or whatever. But for whatever reason, the king misses the flip side of the coin. And we could park it right there, and we could learn some lessons from that in our own lives. I think we could learn to look at things from various angles and perspectives before we make big decisions like this, because this is a big decision. Johnny. Oh, for sure. Yeah. What's happened to the last two kings we've seen that have had a pride issue? It hasn't ended well. It didn't end well for Nebuchadnezzar. It didn't end well for Belshazzar when their pride got the better of them. And so here we have an instance where this king allows his pride to get the better of him, and it doesn't end well for him. Still, not to the degree that it went for Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, but he's still going to suffer some consequences because of this. There's going to be some loss that's experienced because of this exercise. So, pride goes before a fall here all through the book of Daniel.
I think also the group that was, from verse 4, they were trying to come up with a way to trap Daniel.
Right.
And then at the end of verse 7, it says for 30 days.
Yeah.
And I just think if you're thinking of something, to catch somebody, you want to extend it long enough that they'll do it.
Right.
So they know in 30 days, there's no way that Daniel won't.
They'll have,
Petitioning God.
right.
And then that caveat, or whatever you say, that sign it so it can't be changed.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, you wonder about their choice of verbiage as they're speaking to the king, and reminding the king, oh, by the way, king, when you sign this, remember that you can't change your mind. Okay? And that's like, man, if somebody presents an idea to me and they're saying, now, if you agree to this, you can't change your mind, that's going to make me think awful hard. Why would they think I might want to change my mind? What about this would possibly make me want to change my mind before I agree to it? So maybe I should see if I need to change my mind now before I make the agreement. So that's a good thing to point out. And there's another thing as we read through here, as we read through several different sections today. Let's see, these commissioners. Okay, verse 6. These commissioners and satraps came by agreement. Take note of that phrase, and kind of see the number of times that this kind of thing is happening. And maybe as we make our way through there, we'll kind of parse out what that means and why they're acting that way. It's not one guy coming to the king on his own. They keep coming to the king by agreement, and we'll see if there's anything to be seen there by that. Daniel 6 verses 10 through 13. Now when Daniel knew that the document was signed, he entered his house. Now in his roof chamber he had windows open toward Jerusalem, and he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God as he had been doing previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Then they approached and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. Did you not sign an injunction that any man who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days is to be cast into the lion's den? The king replied, the statement is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which may not be revoked. Then they answered and spoke before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the injunction which you signed, but keeps making his petition 3 times a day. So, in the last section, we had the idea of false piety. They're coming to the king with this idea that makes them seem like they're being humble towards their king, right? King, we want to honor you. We want to exalt you. We want to praise you. We want to build you up as a great king that we know you to be. And we think everybody needs to recognize this about you. So we think we should have this law in place so that everybody has to acknowledge you as a great king. And that's just they don't really believe that. They're manipulating him. They're lying to him. If they really believed he was a great king, they wouldn't do that. And so it's false piety wrapped in this pretty package. But here we have true piety wrapped in humility and sincerity with Daniel. He's truly pious. He's truly seeking the one that is greater than him. He is truly seeking to be humble. He's truly seeking to honor and elevate God above all things. And he continues to do that in humility and sincerity as he has always done. He doesn't alter what he's doing one way or the other before or after this injunction is passed. Don?
Just the thought of the Medes at that time, first, the king of them was the representative of all the deities that they had in the place, all their different idols and stuff.
Sure.
So they were playing on that, on him. I can see that anyways, to make him feel the bluster his
Right.
feel of importance there.
Yeah.
That he had to do that.
Yeah.
Also, I can see that possibly being part of that. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think with their with their pagan beliefs and their polytheism that they would have been a part of, and they would have had their kind of their chief god or whatever. But one reason that they would have not just made this a law forever is because we have gods that we do pray for, but they'll understand if we take a break for 30 days and only pray to the king, and then we can come back to them later and it'll be okay because they don't amount to anything anyway. But Daniel's not going to take a 30-day break from praying to his God, even if he doesn't pray to the king, because does the law says they have to pray to the king, or just if they pray they have to pray to the king? Because you got to wonder if maybe some people just took 30 days off from praying, and so Daniel's not going to take 30 days off. He's not going to ignore his God for 30 days. But if you're praying to an idol, what's it matter anyway? And so I agree. I think they're doing that. Greg?
It talks about that according to the law of the Persian. I saw you have constitutional monarchy there differing from, so apparently
Yeah.
they have some rules that the kings had to go by.
Yeah.
That were in place. Am I wrong? It wasn't Esther during the Persian and wasn't the same kind of thing in play, when they put
Yeah.
those edicts out and all the Jews are going to
Yeah.
they had to do a workaround
Right.
to get around
Yeah.
the law that was in place.
Esther is maybe 100. She's over 100 years after Daniel, but she is still under the Medes or under the Persian Empire before Alexander the Great conquered them, and so yes, and that comes into that whole thing of Naaman's not his name. The bad guy in Esther's story. Haman, not Naaman, Haman. Not Uberu, who drove a Subaru. All right, what was I? Haman, passed the law that they were going to kill, and he got the king to sign it, that we're going to kill all the Jews on a certain day, and we can't revoke the law, but what we can do is amend the law to say, oh yeah, you can go out and kill all the Jews you want to, but guess what? We're going to arm the Jews, and they get to fight back. And so all of a sudden, well, maybe we don't want to do that. And so that's kind of, and we'll talk about that at the end of this story. How does the law get amended? Because we can't change the law, we can't undo the law. So what happens to this law after the lion's den? Well, I kind of have that thought later towards the end. Chuck?
Yeah, that's very well. What I was this must be kind of not a total monarchy. It's kind of a checks and balances type of government.
Yeah.
It seems like, and I was sitting there thinking, had this happened during Nebuchadnezzar's time, he would go, I'll do it if I want to.
Yeah.
because I'm the king.
Right.
It
Yeah.
seems like it was a different type of
And
monarchy during his time.
And it is also, Darius is, well, he is a king, but he is a regional king. He is not the king. We're under Cyrus is the king. And so Darius is like, he's a king, but he's not he's like a king over part of it. Kind of like Herod in the book of Acts was king over Judah in that region, but he still answered to Caesar. He didn't get to do whatever he wanted to do. He had to, and so, think of Darius as like Herod, and Cyrus would have been like Caesar. And so, my thought was, well, who's going to enforce this? Well, if they don't like what Darius does as the king and he breaks the Persian law and they report that to Cyrus, Cyrus is going to have something to say about that. So Cyrus is the ultimate enforcer, and I don't know if Cyrus would have been as beholden to the law as Darius was, but it was, there were layers of checks and balances in place for sure. Okay, so how was Daniel caught? Did you see the phrase?
He was doing what he always did, and they knew that that's
Yeah.
what he did. And they just waited,
Yeah.
they knew through
Peeping
time
toms.
he was
Yeah.
going to be doing this.
Yeah.
All they had to do was just go in there
And catch him.
whenever they knew he'd be doing it.
And so verse 11, they did what? They came by agreement. Hey, all right, we got the law passed. Everybody be at Daniel's house tomorrow at 8:15 because at 8:30 he's going to be praying, right? And so we're all going to walk in together because who are we accusing here? We're not accusing just some guy from the street corner. We're accusing our boss. He's the guy that the king has put in charge of all of us. And I'm not going to accuse him by myself because that wouldn't get me anywhere. If he denies it, it's going to be my word against him, and the king likes him better. So we got to come together, and we all have to be in agreement.
I know there's a lot of years that's gone by through all the things that have happened. But you'd think they would remember some of it.
You think? Well, yeah. Right? You would think, wouldn't you? I mean, why did the Pharisees keep asking Jesus questions? Yeah. That hasn't been that long ago. That was just recently. So yeah, within the last year or so that happened. And so you would think that they would know some of these stories and know who Daniel is. But I cannot account for why people do the foolish things they do. Come spend a day in my classroom.
Together go in there because they didn't have video cameras.
They didn't have, they didn't have footage. They had to go in and see it together. And so how many is this? Is it the two other head guys? Do they have a couple of lackeys with them? Is it 20 guys? Is it 50 guys? We don't know how many it is. But it's the ones that are responsible for convincing the king to sign the law. They came together as a group to the king to convince him to sign the law, saying that everybody signed on to it, which presumably the king would have assumed Daniel had signed on to this. And then we're going to go as a group and see Daniel praying so that we can verify that this is happening. And then I wonder what they're going to do next. We're going to go as a group to the king, and we're going to hold the king's feet to the fire to do what he said he was going to do. And so they are acting as a unit in their sorcery, not their sorcery, but their manipulation and their what is the word I'm looking for? Their intrigue, I guess. He was caught by agreement because they all came to spy on him. 14 and 15. Then, as soon as the king heard, we didn't even talk about that. The statement is they all came to the king, and they have to tell the king again. Remember, king, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, it can't be revoked. And Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you. Well, is that true? I mean, he has disregarded the law that the king has passed, but has Daniel ever been unfaithful in his service to the king? Now, we'll see that mentioned later. And so, again, they're totally misrepresenting things. Who are the ones that have been unfaithful to the king? they have been unfaithful to the king. They've manipulated the king. They've lied to the king. They have misused the law to their own purpose to get the king to do what they wanted to do. All of these things are exactly what they're accusing Daniel of, but they're the ones that are doing it. So verse 14 and 15, then as soon as the king heard the statement, he was deeply distressed and set his mind on delivering Daniel. And even until sunset, he kept exerting himself to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, recognize, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or statute which the king establishes may be changed. So, have you ever realized your mistake too late? If you're human, you've probably had that experience. He knows he's been had. He knows he's been played. He knows that this was not the outcome I foresaw here. First of all, did he think he was going to have to throw anybody into the lion's den? Anybody at all? Well, no. I mean, he thinks everybody's on board with this. They told me that everybody agreed with this. They said everybody wanted this. And so maybe some peasant on the street corner, refuses to pray to the king. We got to throw that little peasant into the lion's den, and everybody has a good time then. But my own trusted advisor, I thought he was on board with this. You told me that he agreed to this. Yeah.
That'd be a question that I'd be asking.
Yeah.
I said, when you told me that everybody was.
Yeah.
But we find out that that's not true, so you guys manipulated the law, so then that law should be null and void.
Right.
It shouldn't even be enforced because you brought it under the circumstances that you brought.
Yeah.
That's not what.
And yet they've got the piece of paper with the king's signature on it, or a stamp or a seal or whatever, that says that it's a law now and it has to be honored. He doesn't get to back out of it. And so that was their play. That was their strategy. We get the king to sign it, and then he has to honor it. He has to obey it. So the king, he's asking the questions now that he should have asked before he signed it. And that's where we find ourselves sometimes when we paint ourselves into a corner, or we realize that we've made a blunder, we've made a mistake, and we start looking back on how we got here. How did I even get to this point? And we start looking back and thinking, oh, there was a warning sign, there was an opportunity to change, and now all of a sudden I'm here and it's too late. I've already made the mistake. And so, let's learn from those. Let's learn from when we see other people do those things, because here we have an example of a king doing it, and it's a good warning for us. It's a good lesson for us that we think things through before we make big decisions, especially. So there, did you see the phrase again? It's in there again. They came by agreement. They come back to the king. The king has done, I like that phrase, he has exerted himself all day. He's not just sitting on the throne wringing his hands. He's talking to other advisors. He's searching the law books. He is looking for other case law or examples. I don't know what kind of judicial system they had in place, but he's going to the Supreme Court and he's asking questions. He is exerting himself trying to find a way to get out of this. He is not passively sitting by and trying to, just wringing his hands over it. He is working to try to save Daniel.
I may think of things oddly because of the books I read. To me, the law said he had to put him in the lion's den, but what if there weren't any lions?
Oh, what if we got the lions out of the lion's den? We obey the spirit of the law, or the letter of the law, but not the spirit. Huh? I never thought of that, Johnny. That's an interesting thought. See there, you should have been one of his advisors. What if we let the lions go? All right, Don. Yeah, I know. That's a good one. Okay, we'll take it, Becky. So we've talked about Daniel's reputation and how, these other prefects and satraps and guys should have known better than to try to get one over on Daniel. And maybe we lay this at the feet of the idea that the king hasn't gotten to know Daniel that well yet, because he's only been in power probably for less than a year by the time this takes place. And yeah, but so he knows Daniel's worth, but not, he doesn't have a full understanding that it's because Daniel follows the God he does, that's why he's worth so much. And so, sees Daniel as, as on par with the rest of the governors, just a little smarter, but doesn't understand that it's because of the God that he serves, maybe.
I'm kind of wondering if these guys, satraps, come with a little bit of an attitude now that they know they trapped him, and then now that they've got him trapped,
Yeah.
then it swings, and now that they've become arrogant with him,
Yeah.
they get to go play with the kiddies a little bit later.
Yeah. And that's, here it is again. We came together as a group to go present the idea to the king. We went together as a group to go catch Daniel doing what he did. Now we've come together to tell the king about it. And now that the king knows, and the king's been working all day, and so far the king has not honored the Persian law, and the sun's about to go down. And we don't let the sun go down without the law being kept. And so the sun's going down, and we got to go get a hold of the king, and I'm not going to go tell him by myself. So we all go together to tell the king. I mean, it's just over and over and over again that they are in this together. And so even if they get their way, if everything works the way they want it to, and Daniel gets eaten by lions, what's the best position they find themselves in? We've got a king that's really mad at them, that's probably never going to trust him again. Yeah, then they've got to stick together, because they're not going to be able to count on this king to have their back after this. This king is not going to be their friend, regardless of how this ends after today, because now they have revealed their character to the king, and they obviously didn't think this thing through all the way to the end. They think they're getting one over on the king and on Daniel, and before it's over with, they're going to be sorry they tried that. Next section, verses 16 to 18. The king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. The king spoke and said to Daniel, "Your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you." The stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel. Then the king went off to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. Okay, so we had several times, and this is just an interesting thing for me to track through Daniel, the book of Daniel. We talked at length several times about Nebuchadnezzar and the development of Nebuchadnezzar's faith, and where did it start? How far did it get to? Did it ever get as far as we wanted it to? Those kind of things. So how, at this moment in the story, how do we rate Darius's faith based on what he's just said?
Personally, I don't know, but he thinks he has some, verse 16, your God whom you constantly serve will. He has some indirect faith in God.
It's
He has a kind of a faint understanding, he said, hopefully your God will save you.
so, yeah. So, and I think he says more than that. He doesn't say hopefully. He says your God will. So let's think about what did the king do? What has the king been doing for the last 10 or 12 hours? He's been exerting himself to try to save Daniel. I think he's learned a lot about Daniel in this last day. And so the question earlier was, how did the king not know that this would affect Daniel? How did the king not know? Well, he didn't know Daniel that well. By the end of the day, he knows Daniel really well. He's heard the stories. He knows now about interpreting the dreams for Nebuchadnezzar on a couple of different occasions. He knows about the handwriting on the wall. He knows, he's probably heard about Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who came out of a fiery furnace. And so all of a sudden, this guy that I knew was a really, really good advisor, and when he gave me advice, it was really good advice, and I benefited from whatever he said. Now I'm beginning to see where that comes from, and it comes from the fact that he serves this God that I've never heard of. And it's his God. It's still Daniel's God when he says, your God whom you serve constantly. Well, how does he know that Daniel serves him constantly? Well, he's learned that today. I mean, he's been asking questions, and he's learned about Daniel. And so this God whom you serve constantly will deliver you, because I've heard the stories about the dreams, and I've heard the stories about the lion or the fiery furnace, and I've heard all these other things, and I think you're going to be fine, Daniel.
I think there's so many indicators. I think there's a lot of indicators that we really did have a personal understanding of it before this. But verse, let's see, verses 6 through 9, they don't really say that was the only issue brought to it. It could have, it might not have been the only thing.
The only charge they had against Daniel?
No, he might have signed a lot of
Oh,
stuff that
yeah,
I don't think that,
yeah,
the idea that he made a bad decision in that moment
yeah.
came to him and imposed the
They,
law. I don't think that necessarily indicates he didn't have a personal understanding. There's so many indicators there.
yeah. And it's possible. Yeah. It is possible, and I do like to speculate about some of these details and things, and it is possible that he had a good understanding who Daniel was, and just didn't think about the consequences of that decision, or didn't think about how it would affect Daniel, and kind of let it slide by without putting very much thought into it. And I can't discount that, but now that he has it in front of him, and all of those things come to light, that's when he starts asking those questions that he should have asked in the first place. And it's, how did I get here? How did I get to this point where now I'm about to lose my best advisor? Okay. So, and yeah, we can rate the development of Darius's faith as we go along. Because I think that's a good, I think that's a valuable lesson for us to take note of. So why seal the entrance of the, makes it official? What's that? 2 reasons. Okay. I can't discount the idea that we're going to see a tomb later that's been sealed that somebody comes out of. And there's some foreshadowing going on there, perhaps. That I think that's a good thought. Yeah. 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 If Daniel. So I think the officials want it sealed so they know the king doesn't let Daniel out. And I think the king wants it sealed so he knows the officials don't go in there and kill Daniel, because he thinks Daniel's going to come out alive. And so I think there's a little bit of kind of checks and balances on both groups of people here. The people that want Daniel dead and the people that want him alive are both kind of keeping watch on each other. And it did, yeah. I mean, he put his stamp on there. I put Daniel in the lion's den. The law said I had to do it. I put him in there. My stamp is on there to show that I put him in there. How did the king spend the night? Speculation alert. What does it specifically say? Okay, what usually accompanies fasting? I mean, most of the time, right? That's a phrase, right? Prayer and fasting. And so usually with fasting, we think of some sort of meditation or praying going on. Who's the king praying to? You don't think he was praying at all?
He was just depriving himself of food and entertainment.
Okay. Well, now you're not letting me speculate. If as we usually think about prayer and fasting going hand in hand, if the king is praying, who does the law say he has to pray to? Himself. Who's Daniel praying to while he's in the lion's den? He's in the lion's den, still breaking the law, by the way. And so it's an interesting thing to consider the thought that if the king is spending time praying, who's he praying to? First of all, is he praying to Daniel's God? I don't know. Is he praying to his own gods?
Well, if he's not praying, he's probably thinking, okay, my best servant, possibly a really good friend, he just sent to death.
Yeah.
Then he's also thinking, okay, if I did this and it was wrong, if his God is that powerful, what's going to happen to me?
Yeah.
So those are probably some things that are going through his head.
Yeah. Johnny.
Every time he talks about it, he says, your God.
Yeah.
Not my God, your
Right.
God. So I don't think he's praying to God.
Okay. I don't think he's praying to Daniel's God either, although, well, I don't know. Anyway, that's, like I said, speculation alert. Just something I had, when I read that word fasting, I thought, usually we talk about prayer in that context as well. It's not there, but what if it was? If it was, who's he praying to?
In other kingdoms, other times, they always say, your God.
Yeah.
You know, because this is something, when they come in, the Israelites came in, I mean, this was something, they brought in something foreign to everybody else,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's just like, you know, your government, when somebody comes over, you know, your government, because it's, you know, it's, if they come over to visit or whatever, it's your government, because it's not theirs.
Right.
At least not at that point,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's just my thoughts on that.
I think you're right, and even I think even Nebuchadnezzar, you know, as his faith develops, he does talk about, well, I can't remember now. Let's not go back, but you know, his faith does seem to develop where it's strictly their God, and then it becomes the God, not necessarily ever my God, but you know, there is a God that reigns, kind of thing, and so his view sort of expands as he has more and more interaction. Let's keep going. We got a few minutes left. Let's try to wrap up here. Then the king arose at dawn at the break of day and went in haste to the lion's den. When he had come near the den, Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lion's den? Then Daniel spoke to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him, and also toward you, O king, I have committed no crime. Then the king was very pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury was found on him because he had trusted in his God. The king then gave orders, and they brought those men who had maliciously accused Daniel, and they cast them, their children, and their wives into the lion's den. And they had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Okay. Now we know. I got to wonder if their lives were going to be preserved whether or not Daniel lived. I mean, I almost think the king had them rounded up during the night already. And regardless of what happened to Daniel, they're next in line. That makes me wonder. Jacob? That's a great, I don't know, parallel or line to follow through the story. Yeah, I mean, if Darius is worthy of being prayed to, then he ought to have some kind of power, but he was powerless to save Daniel, and he had to rely on Daniel's God to save him. That's a great great point. I like that. Why didn't I think of that? A lot of humbling going on. So why does Darius rush to the den in the morning? Well, he wants to know. I mean, he's been up all night. He hadn't slept a wink. Sleep fled from him. He's been fasting all night, and he wants to go and see. And he asks, the question is interesting to me, after what he tells Daniel, your God whom you constantly serve will save you. And then he hollers into the lion's den, Daniel, did your God whom you constantly serve, was he able to save you? So does that demonstrate a lack of faith, or a lack of belief that Darius, wondered, did he or didn't he, will he or won't he, could he or couldn't he?
We had to find out somehow.
Yeah. He, yeah. Servant of the living God. I like that because, the gods that they would have served would have been idols, dead gods.
But isn't it true that when we fret and worry over issues, that sometimes our faith kind of wanes?
Who are you talking about?
And instead of letting it go and saying, God's going to take care of this and go on, but we fret over it, we think about it, we try and come up with our own answers on how it's going to happen, and we're letting our faith in God slip.
That sums it up very well. I think, yeah, he hadn't had a good night's sleep. He was weak. Thomas asked to see proof, and I'm glad that he did. I love that story, and his he got to see the proof. So Darius made the statement of faith, but then still wants to see that faith vindicated, still wants to see that faith made true. What is the difference of his faith as he's walking to the lion's den versus after he hears Daniel's voice? What happens to his faith in that moment? So he had all the faith he could muster, literally all the faith he could get, that he could well up with inside himself. As he's walking to the lion's den, he calls out Daniel's name, and then when he hears Daniel's voice, that faith grows. And so that's a great experience. Yeah, there you go. He exerted himself all day long and couldn't fix it, and then he just had to sit and wait on God. And so that's the point.
I think one of the other things is a big point is, you don't see Daniel worried. But the king is.
Yeah,
But Daniel, it doesn't seem that he's worried about anything.
yeah. Daniel, kind of like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, our God will save us, but even if he doesn't, it's okay. We're not going to bow down to you. And so Daniel has that same attitude. God will save me, even if he doesn't. Okay, I'm still not going to pray to you, King. Daniel hadn't forgotten him. Yeah, for sure. And so why is judgment passed the way that it is on Daniel's accusers? I can understand the dudes being thrown into the lion's den for what they've done to the king. Why the women and children? I think it was part of their cultural, meting out of justice. I think to some degree, I think that probably would have been a big part of it.
Well, there's always been the thing of you have to get rid of the children so that
Yeah.
they didn't come back after you.
Yeah.
Vengeance.
Yeah.
But it's a terrible reminder to women to be sure who they marry.
Tracy's like, now you tell me. Okay. Yeah, that's again, there you go, Johnny, thinking a little different than the rest of us. That's okay. All right. I wasn't going there, but I think it's a very very blunt reminder of the suffering that sin can cause. And we have the Bible verses that tell us that the children won't suffer the sins of the father, and I think that's more of a divine judgment type of thing versus not necessarily suffering the consequences of sin, and I see it every day at school. I see children that are suffering because of the consequences of their parents' sin. I see that every day. And, you know, they've not done anything to deserve that, but the lives their parents are living is having a direct impact on the way that these kids come into my room every day. And so, and I mean, Chuck saw that in his line of work. Doctors see it in their line of work. I mean, we can see it. You can go to Walmart and you can see it. And so, sin is serious. And when sin prevails, as it did in the lives of these men, it has far-reaching consequences, and it harms people that you wouldn't even think it would harm. So often people say, well, my sin is between me and God. It doesn't hurt anybody else. Baloney. It does. And that, we can never lose sight of that. And the stories like this remind us of that fact. Real quick, I know we're over. 25, then Darius the king wrote to all the peoples, nations, men of every language who are living in all the land, may your peace abound. I make a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and enduring forever, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. He delivers and rescues and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has also delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So what about the original law? We already, we had the 30 days aren't up yet, presumably. And so we can't undo the law of the Medes and Persians. Yeah. Well, but what about everyone else? And so they're to fear and tremble. And so we can call that prayer. We don't have to call it prayer. We can call it fear and trembling. And so, all right, Tim.
After seeing what happened to the bad boys,
Yeah.
I don't think you'd rather anybody.
Who's going to bring an accusation? Yeah, who's going to bring an accusation now against somebody praying to get Daniel's God? And so Daniel's God gets a pass on this one. We can pray to him. And then has Darius's faith grown through this process? Well, he just declared Daniel's God the living God whose kingdom will never fail. That's pretty big for a king to say there's a God whose kingdom will never fail, who will endure forever. And that's a tremendous sign of growth there. So, final lesson, when our faith is on display, it will have an influence on the people around us. And Daniel's faith was on display, and it certainly influenced the king. So that's good.
One quick thing, they could not tangibly touch Daniel's God, whereas they were used to icons, I guess.
Yeah,
statues,
idols.
Idols, even if it's themselves. And so I think there's some faith there. Have faith in somebody you can't see, but you did see Daniel walk
Yeah.
into the lion's den unharmed.
Yeah. There you go. To declare, we have idols that don't do anything, but there's a God who is a living God that is we can't see, is a remarkable step. Yeah, Johnny. The lions definitely wasn't because they'd missed a meal or two. The lions were all right.